WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I got a special segment here. We haven't done a whole lot of Baltimore sports in a while. We've been keeping calm and staying local. And head coach Brian Billick is our partner on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. Everyone knows that. And Coach has been back and forth. And, you and I have not talked either privately or publicly about this. And Dennis Colatzos is with us for all of our draft coverage here, of course, this week as well. But, Coach, where did you get isolated and sequestered? And I was hoping that it was somewhere where your grandkids were, but I'm not sure that that's what happened, right?
No, actually, we live down here on the Delmarva Peninsula on the Eastern Shore, which by nature is pretty sequestered in itself. In fact, I don't know if it's a good thing, a bad thing, or a sad commentary on my life, but our life really hasn't changed a whole lot with all this just because of where we're at. I get out and go to the store, and I've got my gloves and my mask and doing all that kind of thing. We're pretty much sequestered here on the shore, just like everybody else, riding this thing out.
Well, you haven't seen your grandkids and kids. And Dennis, I know I could bring you in this. Hello to Dennis Colatzos. Dennis, say hello to Coach. It's a little awkward without a Zoom here, but it's always great to have you with us, pal.
Well, it's great to have you as well as Coach Billick. I couldn't ask for better company.
Well, for all of us being sequestered and being away from things, this is the thing that brings us together. And, Coach, I'll bring you on later, and we can get heavy on the world and, everything going on and the greater scope of the NFL. But the NFL's decided to do this and draft. I think it's going to be a little fractured on Thursday, a little weird. But from the football perspective, and I haven't talked to Eric DeCosta much, if you're still the coach of the Ravens, or does this help you or hurt you as the Ravens as an organization? I tend to think the Ravens are already better at doing this than most of the other teams. I would think that they'll be even better in this way where they have more access to information than maybe other teams would.
Well, I think all the teams will be up to snuff, but you're right. I think the Ravens have been on the forward cutting edge of anything to do with technology in the business. There are some organizations that lag behind, but everybody has a robust IT. And I think the Ravens and Eric DeCosta obviously has a firm understanding. My buddy Ozzie, of course, Ozzie would still have a rotary dial phone if you could find one. Okay, so this would have been a lot for Ozzie to deal with in terms of his trust of it. But the hard part will be, and obviously it can certainly be done, but particularly on draft day when you want that looking into the eyes of a scout or a coach when you're having those final conversations about what you're going to do, and to be able to have those little scrimmages that we used to talk about. They'll get it done, but it's going to feel different. And so I'm sure for Eric and for John, it's going to feel a little more isolated in terms of the decisions that you're making. You have all the information, but it's just going to feel different.
Well, and the time taken away from you, right? From the kids, from the agents, from the pro days. Does that stuff have value? I mean, there's that great story of Kyle Bowler in Stanford impressing you. I mean, there's things that impress people, in a job circumstance that the more looks you get. I would always feel that way if I were, applying for a job. The more you can see me, the more you'd like me. I would think all the kids feel that way, that something's been taken away from them in a chance to impress an Ozzie Newsome. I can't impress you if I don't get in front of you, right?
Yeah, and that lack of face-to-face, even if it's just bringing, in the spring, you'd go out to the workouts and then you'd bring a handful of players in for that second go-round, whether it was a physical or those types of things, that obviously has been eliminated. So your exposure to the players is more limited. It's going to be interesting because whether it's that or it is the fact that, there's no OTAs. They're doing the virtual teaching now. You're not going to be able to get your hands on these rookies. The veterans, they may not come together until training camp, which will present an interesting scenario by which, let's say that happens. Let's say you don't have the OTAs, you just have the virtual training. You come to training camp, you get through that, you start the season, and the product is what the product is, and it's about the same. Don't think for a minute the players aren't going to be going, well, wait a minute now. We didn't have to do all that stuff in the off-season this year, and it seems to be okay. Why don't we just do away with these off-season OTAs and all this and, the other? There's going to be a hue and cry for that. The hard one is with the rookies, the fact that you're not going to be able to get hands on the rookies to try to indoctrinate them into, you may not actually have them till you get to training camp. that's going to be the most anxious, both for the players and for the coaches.
I accused Kyle Bowler of being Stanford. I meant Cal. I get them confused, and I know that would get me in a lot of trouble and a lot of conversations to Stanford and Cal. Dennis, I want to bring you into this. I mean, you've been running Coons Ford throughout this crisis, but you're still very into the draft. And, Coach, one of the reasons I brought Dennis along this week is Dennis has been way more into it than I have been this year. Same thing even with Luke saying, well, I wasn't sure they were really going to draft football players. But, Dennis, this is your favorite part of the year. You're into this on Thursday nights. I definitely wanted to bring it in so you could talk some football players with Coach.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'll get right into it. One of my guys that I work with, Jack Cosma, he says, ask Coach about what Eric DeCosta said a couple of months ago about making the Ravens indefensible. Coach, could you speak to that from your perspective?
Well, obviously, when you begin with the dynamic play of Lamar Jackson, and I think what he may be referring to is obviously expanding on their ability to throw the ball. I know the number one thing there that Lamar is going to work on, whether it's on his own or when they get to training camp, as spectacular MVP season as he has had, they want to be better at throwing from the numbers out. That's where he was the most vulnerable in terms of interceptions, incompletions. To expand that part of the resume, so to speak, to be a little bit more efficient and proactive in the pocket. And, of course, to continue to do on the things that he's doing and then add to it. I would think in this coming draft, which they're in great position, particularly in the first 3 rounds, I would think that another receiver would be something they would covet. The fact that they traded off Hurst because they have an embarrassment of riches at tight end that has allowed them to pick up another second-round pick. Offensive line with obviously the retirement of Marshall Yanda, I would think that would be job one for the Ravens. And, of course, we've seen them constantly trying to find and sign people at linebacker and at defensive. They're looking for that edge rusher. So I would say offensive line, edge rusher, and maybe a receiver that you'll likely see one of each of those in these first 3 rounds.
Coach, with the draft being a little disjointed in this way, and you talk about most of the coaches, you weren't the most paranoid guy. I've met a whole lot more paranoid coaches than you, but the paranoia of the league and information and Zoom chats and Wi-Fi, I mean, we remember when the Vikings couldn't get their pick up to the table and they were all in the same room for crying out loud a number of years ago. Any concerns about any snafu-related things that could happen here this weekend amidst all of this madness? And I know you're participating in NFL Network as well.
Yeah, I'm sure there are concerns. They had their dry run that had some hiccups in it early, but kind of got smoothed out. And you realize the draft itself, we could do it this way. If not for the media attention and the profitability of doing the draft, if you just wanted to draft players and weren't going to try to show the fans and didn't try to make money off of it, you could do the entire draft in a morning now. The clubs could do it. We have the technology to put that thing together. But obviously there's still the element they want to include the fans. And so, yeah, I think this will actually go pretty good in terms of the clubs feeling like someone's hacking in. Yeah, there is a certain paranoia that every club has about, the information that gets out and how you rank a player and how that affects certain trades. And if you're interacting with your staff via that, and we've all seen in the news that in Zoom and the way people can hack into it, I'm sure a lot of them are going through a number of their cybersecurity to make sure that's not being done. It's hard for me to imagine that a club would proactively go and do that to try to steal someone's signal, because the ramifications of that would be, I can't imagine what that fine would be.
Yeah, they would do the same thing they did to Belichick. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Coach Billick is here, Living Classrooms Foundation, and Dennis Kolatzos will be here on Thursday from 3 to 5, getting you ready for the draft and the post-draft. Dennis will be with us for full draft coverage all weekend long, as will Luke Jones. If you're on our WNST text service brought to you by Coons Ford Security Boulevard, you will get those picks first as they come off. One last thing, Coach, for you, and I'm going to let Dennis go player by player, but Dennis and I have been talking with lots of folks. We had Greg Cosell earlier, Mike Tanier, a bunch of people, about needs for the Ravens, and the Ravens is a 14-2 team. Hard to get better than 14-2. I mean, and to think that they don't have a lot of needs. The Marshall Yanda out, Calais Campbell in, and where they would go. We talked a lot about linebacker. We talked a lot about wide receiver and sort of weapons for the Ravens. But the fascinating part for me with the Ravens is and Dennis has talked about this a lot, they usually just take the best player, right? I mean, we'll sit here and talk about linebackers and wide receivers, but that's not necessarily the way the organizational's their philosophy's been over the course of time. And certainly when you're picking at 28, right?
Yeah, I mean, and Eric has continued on with the philosophy that Ozzie always had, which of course was, and it's a very prudent one, is try to address as many of your needs as possible in free agency. It doesn't have to be the big splash. Certainly I thought Calais Campbell was a great pickup, Derek Wolfe. But you do that so that you're not forced into taking a pick in the draft, particularly early. Need is a terrible evaluator. And if you convince yourself of a player's abilities because that's what you need, particularly with the early picks, then you get into trouble. And I think the Ravens have done that. You know, when they've got 5 picks in the first 3 rounds, when I say obviously receiver, offensive line, edge rusher will be a priority, the good thing is they don't have to take, you know, any one of those at any position. They can let what comes to them, particularly when you're talking the first round, and it's, you know, subjective for everybody as to who will go and where. I've been doing a number of mock drafts for the league and for the NFL Network, and to see how this thing. But when you look, if you just look at some of the names, some of the options, you know, a guy like Patrick Queen from LSU, a linebacker, could be there at 28. T. Higgins from Clemson, although some people see him moving up a lot quicker. An offensive tackle like Joshua Jones, although I think they want to focus a little bit more inside. A guy that I'd be very interested in is the center from Michigan, Ruiz. You know, again, just to secure the interior part of that line. So they're going to have a number of options, and the ability to move around if they want. If they think, you know what, if a bunch of these guys are available, maybe like we've done in the past, we'll fall back and pick up another second or third round to get a couple of these guys, because that's always been the tradition as well. If I can get the same value at 40 that I think I can get at 28, well, then why not fall back and pick up another pick, particularly when I rate it as the same level of player.
Dennis Colazzos joining us here along with head coach Brian Billick, our familiar voice on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. You can follow Coach Billick out on Twitter as well as through all of the pandemic stuff. Him and his grandkids are tweeting and writing about Tom Brady as well. Dennis, I know you got a bunch of stuff and some players you want to go through with the coach.
No, the coach has done a lot of homework, obviously, and he knows what the Ravens need. And as you mentioned, they have a lot of picks, a lot of draft capital. Coach, it seems like in this year's draft, the beauty is really in the eye of the beholder. There's players with grades all over the place, all over the map. One general manager has quipped that a lot of fans are going to be very disappointed because the draft is going to play out in a way that they're not planning on it. So everybody's all over the place this year, it seems like.
Yeah, and that's not untypical. There's always that, particularly in the first round, there's always someone takes a player that you'd look up and you know, in the first round, and I'd look at our board and we've got this guy at 60, you know, at 57, and you're going, wow, what is it, you know, and it's good news, bad news. Your first instinct is, boy, did they miss on this guy? But then the other part of it flips in going, well, wait a minute, what do they know that we don't know? And it really does. It comes down to, sometimes it's situational or a position specific, that maybe a player has a specific skill set that is good, but not in your scheme. It's not valued as much as maybe in another scheme. So yeah, you are going to see it. The quarterbacks, and of course we always talk about the quarterbacks, but where these quarterbacks fall, the huge disparity. I've been talking all week about this and talking with coaches and scouts and different people at the network as to what their view is. Obviously, most people believe Burrow's going to be number one with Cincinnati. But the diverse opinions on Tua from Alabama, and I'll just call him Tua. I don't want to disrespect him and mangle his last name. But Tua at Alabama and Herbert at Oregon as to who's actually better and where they may go. The opinions are all over the place on those guys, which is an example of telling you that this is not an exact science. And it is beauty in the eye of the beholder, and the quarterback, no more so than at the quarterback position.
Where are you on Burrow and all? I mean, and our dear friend and mutual friend Marvin Lewis. It's funny how Cincinnati's picking one all. I said it's like the Bruce Coslet era all over again. You know, like that has become a play, and the kid doesn't want to go there apparently. That's a little disconcerting for them because Marvin certainly felt like that thing was turned around to be competitive. They certainly beat us up enough over the last 10, 12 years to be in this position that quarterback could change everything about Cincinnati. That people believe that, but then he's got to get to the field and want to be there, and obviously the organization's going to have to surround him as well. And if they do, we should be fearful here in Baltimore that the best player's going there, right? Like, we're going to have to deal with that for the next 5 to 10 years if he's that guy.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that he's from Ohio, you know, and not wanting to go to Cincinnati is a little bit of a head scratcher. But the only question on Burrow, and obviously the season he had was like none. I mean, he got to 60 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Almost 70% complete. I mean, the guy was just off the charts, or actually closer to 80%. It was 76% completion percentage. So off the charts. Now, what everybody is talking about was this huge jump from 2018 to 2019. And it has to do with scheme and system and the like. And so it's like the player that you had the one great year. That's not been good in this league. That has been where you lead to mistakes. And so it has less to do with the player than just the general circumstances that have people, you know, a little bit worried. You're right. It's fitting that Cincinnati, if not Cleveland, has this pick. But most people, I think, are a consensus. This, as best you can, this guy ought to be spectacular. Of course, there was no reason why Tim Couch, Achilles Smith, Vince Young, Jamarcus Russell, Joey Harrington, there's no reason those guys shouldn't have been good either. So as we sit here today, yes, this guy looks like he could be spectacular. But at the end of the day, you don't know until it happens.
You did name a couple of Cincinnati Bengals in there. I like the little Achilles Smith and David Klingler. Let's not forget him as well. Throw him in there. Head Coach Billick joining us here. You can follow him throughout the draft all weekend long at Coach Billick. We're actually doing some football here at WNST this week and also some Baltimore positive stuff. You can find Don and I out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault as well for all of that stuff. Dennis Colazzos here from Coons Florida Security Boulevard. He is our draft insider and doing different stuff with us all week. I want to give you one last crack at the coach here before I start getting on him about the grandkids.
All right, this is a something that I read, Coach, a long time ago, and I don't know if there's any truth to it, but I read that Matt Cavanaugh, when Tom Brady was coming out of college, that he was not necessarily pounding the table, but he wants the Ravens to draft Matt Cavanaugh from round 3 on. Is there any truth to that, Coach, or is this just a myth that's been out there for a long time?
You know, I can't say that I remember that specifically, of course. And that wouldn't put past Matt, because Matt, you know, having been in the NFL as a quarterback, had a perspective. You got to remember, and of course, Brady's always the poster child. When the guy, what was he, 196 or something like that? And you know, credit the New England Patriots for taking him. But let's remember now, the New England Patriots have passed on him for 5 rounds too. Okay, so it's not like that, you know. Yeah, and you took a guy. I always tell the story. It's true. When I was in San Francisco, and we took Joe Montana. Now, I was in the draft room, right? I was a lowly, my job was to make sure we had coffee and donuts and to go pick these guys up at the airport. So it's not like I was a part of this process. But I was there when we took Joe Montana. And there's been a lot of stories and different people taking credit for who took Montana and why and what led there. And the room was euphoric. When we took Joe Montana, we just took a guy and then moved on to the 4th round pick. I mean, it was, this kind of matches. That was actually Denny Green and Sam Weiss that had led Bill to him and coming out of Notre Dame, and Bill kind of liked what he saw. But it was, he really wanted Steve Dills, who was at Stanford, that went to Minnesota. And so we ended up taking Montana, and we moved on to the next player.
Did you pick Montana up at the airport, or did they not even fly him in?
No, it did. Yeah, he and Dwight Clark. I went and picked him. It was late, like 1 o'clock.
Whoa. I've known you 23 years. I've never heard this. Have you told this story before?
Well, you know, I tell you what, and this is true, too. I'm going to be like everybody that, you know, you look back and everybody, well, I knew he was going to be great, which is all BS. I mean, like I said, in the room, we just took a guy. But I will tell you this, and you know I'm into tennis. I enjoy pro tennis, and I picked Joe Montana up. Very great guy, great kid. I mean, he was damn near my age. And so I pick him up late at the airport. He's tired. And I'm just visiting, and I'm looking in his eyes, and I'm thinking Bjorn Borg. there was a calm, even to a young Joe Montana, there was a calm about him that I think when you saw and he went on to become one of the greatest players of all time, that's one of the things that people comment on is about the calm demeanor and the way he handles things. The very first time I met him, there was a calmness about him that I thought, wow, it struck me as being different than other players, that you run across. So it was, so in terms of Kavanaugh with Brady, I wouldn't dismiss that. I can't say that I remember that, but that certainly wouldn't surprise me.
This is getting complicated because my mind's working here. I'm thinking, how do I not know that you picked Joe Montana and Dwight Clark up? I've written 2 books that you've been involved in, and the other part of this is Dwight Clark tried to hire you, and you didn't even take his call. I mean, that's even weirder.
He was trying. I got to tell you, he was trying to get his money back because we'd go to training camp, and my other memory of these two is Joe Montana and Dwight Clark immediately hit it off. They were buds, like 2 rookies would, right? Because the veterans are doing their thing. And we used to have video games in our player lounge, but it was when you had to put quarters. And I figured out real quickly, these players come in, they don't have change. So I started stockpiling change, and I'd give them 3 quarters for $1. And these idiots would do it, right? So I made a fortune, and they're putting into quarters. And so I took a lot of Joe Montana and Dwight Clark's money, and I'm sure Dwight was just trying to get it back.
25 cents at a time. Yeah, you have 25 cents bought more back in 1980-81, right?
That's right.
Dennis, you done with the coach before I get grandkid stories out of both of you guys here together? Because, I mean, I've seen Pop-Pops have been real big on Zoom here, I think, during this period of time, right?
Yeah, I'd love to have the coach back here at Coons Ford. He was gracious enough to visit us in the past. My staff is still talking about it. The ladies in the county, they're still swooning. They've never recovered, so they very much want to see Coach come back through again.
How did the kid get up on your lap with the Tom Brady thing? I need to know that, Coach. Come on, bring the grandkids. I got to meet your grandkid, man. I'm fascinated by him.
The great thing about I'm homeschooling my grandkids. I'm doing math with my oldest grandson, Brecken, and thank God he's only in the 2nd grade because I'm studying at night to make sure that I'm covering the right thing and teaching it in the right progression. So every morning about 9:30 we Skype together. And I take him through his, the fractions are killing me, man. Trying to teach fractions to a 2nd grader is interesting.
Well, I always see you in the teacher role, so this is a good spot for you. You doing okay, sequestered and all that stuff? Family's good and all that? I know there's a lot of movement, a lot of activity in the Billick family this time of year, right?
Yeah, the being physically away from the kids is obviously always tough. We normally spend a little bit more time with them, but to be able to hook up with them every day. And like everybody, just kind of dealing with it out here. And it's hard. I realize all around the country right now, people are very anxious. They want to get opened up. And I understand it because where we're at, particularly over here on the Eastern Shore, you just don't, I don't know anybody that has gotten it. And that's not to minimize it. This is dangerous stuff. I get it. I'm 100%, particularly when you're getting up into the age where I am. But to go through this, and you can see some of the frustration because, like me, there's a lot of people that I don't know anybody that's contracted it. So for us to go through all the things we're having to go through, which we need to do, but it not being real because there's nobody I know that has it, you can see where that frustration is building up with people.
Well, I haven't been that fortunate, unfortunately. So, early on we had people in our lives, and now through the magic of the internet and the magic of being 50 years older, it's showing up more, and I hope we keep it down. I hope you're washing your hands, wearing your mask,
Absolutely.
your gloves, and riding your bike and doing all the things that you do to stay healthy. And I really have enjoyed watching you play the role of Pop-Pop. Both of you guys, by the way. So, hey, Dennis, we got a wild Joe Montana story out of Billick today. So, good job. Dennis Colossus from Coons Ford Security Boulevard joining us here. Coach, take care of yourself. We'll see you soon, okay?
Sounds great.
You got it. Dennis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, getting you ready for the draft on Thursday, then post-game Friday, and again on Monday, along with Luke Jones, doing some blanket sports coverage, so much so that I got my purple jacket out here. We are WNST.net AM 1570. We are keeping calm. We are staying local, and we're staying up with Coach Billick and the Living Classrooms Foundation because we are Baltimore Positive.